Hi friends, Simon here from InformedTrades.com. In today's video, we're going to talk about the story of Yamashita's treasure and the Black Hidden Trust, an incredibly crazy story about a hidden financial system based on a large amount of gold that was recovered at the end of World War II. Let's get started. At key points, there is allegedly a hidden financial system based on stolen gold. The majority of proof for this entire system came out, or this entire thesis came out in the Roxas versus Ferdinand Marcos trial that occurred in 1988. Ferdinand Marcos was the former president of the Philippines. Another third key point is, if this whole story is true, is the supply of gold vastly underreported. And if there is a hidden financial system based on this stolen gold, where there's derivatives and bonds and things that people are trading that is all based on this stolen gold as a base reserve asset, what are the implications of that? What does that really mean for investors, traders? What are the opportunities, the risks? What's that mean for day-to-day financial planning? Things like that. Okay, first, sort of the key point, the broad idea. Japan's World War II loot. Basically, during the course of World War II, Japan recovered a lot of gold, gems, stolen treasure from various East Asian countries. You can see the map here on the left. That gold was then stored, or all of that treasure was stored in the Philippines. The treasure that was acquired basically was treasure that had been accumulated over thousands of years. So they found, gold and gems that goes back to, dynasties thousands of years ago in China, Burma, Thailand, etc. They got all that and stored it in the Philippines, and that's sort of the basis of the system. Then at the end of World War II, Japan lost the Allies. The Allies, led by General Douglas MacArthur, found this gold, and they found a part of this gold, I should note, and they set up what's known as the Black Eagle Trust. So they found a part of the gold. They set up what's called a Black Eagle Trust. They did this at Bretton Woods, and that was sort of the basis of, rather than returning the gold to the countries that it was stolen from, they set up this trust, and they said the trust would be used for covert political actions. Now, what exactly that means and how far that goes is, there's a lot of information about that, and I recommend the book Gold Warriors by Sterling and Peggy Seagrave for getting into more of the details and some of the evidence and witness testimony about what that money was actually used for and what the Black Eagle Trust was set up to accomplish. But the basic story of what we know is that Black Eagle Trust was set up based on the treasure that was found during World War II, or at the end of World War II. That trust was set up in 42 countries. So part of the gold was deposited in 42 different countries. At the time in World War II, there were only 76 countries in the world. So a lot of the world was really in on using the Black Eagle Trust as a covert political system to fund covert political actions. That's sort of the basic idea. Obviously, I know that opens up a lot of questions as to who's behind this and what are the covert political actions. We'll skip that. Like I mentioned, this story is very, very big. So that's really, if you're interested in that, I highly recommend checking out the books Gold Warrior by Sterling and Peggy Seagraves, and even there's another one called Babylon's Banksters by Dr. Joseph Farrell. That's probably also one worth checking out. Okay, so now we have the system of this whole bunch of gold that's set up, that's agreed to be used as a fund by a variety of countries that are sort of in on it. It's a secret fund, secret international financial agreement. Based on this fund, bonds are issued. So just the way in the conventional banking system, banks lend money against deposits. They create money and lend money against deposits. The same thing is going on in this hidden financial system where they're lending money and creating money based upon the gold reserves that are in the trust. And that's where you will see stories that have come up in 2009, 2012, where these large sums of bonds are being found that are dismissed by the government as counterfeit, yet they're printed on authentic paper. Bond experts have testified that they are real bonds, but they seem very strange. Maybe one of the strangest examples that I've seen is this one right here. You can see on the screen now. It's a $1 billion note. Again, we assume it's dollars because it clearly looks like a U.S. note, but dollars isn't written anywhere on there. So it's 1 billion units of something. John Kennedy is on the front, and there's a spaceship on the back. This is odd. and it's issued on official paper. You know, and there's other bills like this, right? So if it's counterfeit, which is what authorities say it is, you can see this Bloomberg story here: 6 trillion of fake U.S. bonds seized, and the bonds look like this. Some of them, who counterfeits $1 billion note, right? You normally counterfeit a $20 bill, a $50 bill, a $100 bill, bills that there's a real world counterpart to. If this is totally fake, who would counterfeit that? So that's sort of one big issue. There's also the Japanese 57 bonds, which is that's probably even more clear example where that money, that bond has been insured against. There's been insurance policies taken out on those bonds. Who takes out an insurance bond or insurance policy on counterfeit money, on the transport of counterfeit money, things like that. And these bonds are found in enormous denominations. So the size, to put it in perspective, the size of the U.S. national debt at the time of this video is $18 trillion. This single largest bond recovery that you see here in 2012, which had the Kennedy bearer bonds in it, is $6 trillion. That's the other thing, is that these bonds are bearer bonds, meaning there's no name on them, there's no official owner. It's just whoever shows up with the bond gets the money. At least that's the story. In a lot of instances, people who have tried to redeem these bonds or even inquired about them are arrested. So if you stumble across these bonds, be careful, and you may want to think twice about trying to redeem them. Other allegations say that the bonds are redeemable on a selective basis. So the government chooses who it is willing to negotiate these bonds with, and the other people it puts them in jail. So that way they don't actually have to pay. That's at least what a lot of stories say. Okay, now how much of this is true? And it all sounds like a very far-fetched tale. Probably the most convincing evidence, the most hard evidence that we have for this, came out in the trial of Rogelio Roxas versus President Ferdinand Marcos, the former president of the Philippines. That trial occurred in 1988. Basically, the story goes that Rogelio Roxas found a large amount of gold in the Philippines. And these stories of there being a large amount of gold that relates to stolen Japanese treasure, it was often called Yamashita's gold, Yamashita's treasure, had been going on for quite some time. It's sort of a widespread rumor in the Philippines. And a lot of amateur treasure hunters seek it out. They find treasure maps and things like that. There's a whole subculture related to this. So Roxas stumbled across, he was an amateur treasure hunter. He found a 1-ton golden Buddha with diamonds in its head. And you can see that golden Buddha right here. You can see Roxas, the individual, on the right side of this picture here. He found that, and as he started selling it, word got out to Marcos. Marcos arrested him and tortured him, really, and stole all the gold. Now, in 1988, this actually came to a trial. The court was in Hawaii. They awarded Roxas 3,421 metric tons, or the equivalent to that $22 billion, so it turned out to approximately 3,421 metric tons. That was the amount of gold that they say Roxas had the rights to, that he had discovered, and that Marcos had stolen against him. To put that in perspective, the amount of gold in Fort Knox that the U.S. allegedly owns and claims is 8,044 metric tons. So Roxas discovered basically half of what's in Fort Knox. This is an amazingly large discovery. The court initially awarded $43 billion to Roxas, which was $22 billion based on discovery, and then 10% interest and a little bit more for the torture that he suffered against Marcos. $43 billion is the largest civil lawsuit in world history ever. So this is a pretty significant trial, and a lot of information came out from this trial. But that a jury was able to award this to Roxas is one of the pieces of evidence that's like, wow, Yamashita's treasure and maybe the Black Eagle Trust, there's some evidence for this. Okay. Another piece of interesting evidence is Ferdinand Marcos' wife, Imelda Marcos, after Ferdinand Marcos had passed away, claimed that the family's wealth stems from Yamashita's treasure. So she's admitting here, this is the Bulletin, February of 1992, she's admitting that the family had discovered the hidden gold in Japan, Yamashita's treasure. That sets the stage for, if that story's true, then maybe all the stories about the Black Eagle Trust are also true, and the hidden financial system are also true. But yeah, here it is, an admission. The Marcos family was incredibly wealthy, and it was always a mystery as to, where did this money come from. They were trillionaires by some estimates. So here we have some evidence that that they got the money from by finding Yamashita's treasure. And that also implies how large Yamashita's gold, how much gold Japan really had recovered during the course of World War II and stored in the Philippines. Okay, how big is this treasure really, right? So we've obviously seen how the Marcos family was incredibly wealthy. We know that Rogelio Roxas found 3,421 metric tons of gold. But that's not all. In the trial, Roxas versus Marcos, two witnesses who testified said that Marcos signed contracts to buy Australian real estate using 100,000 metric tons of gold. So he was going to buy an enormous plot of land in Australia. It must have been a fairly large portion of Australia, using 100,000 metric tons of gold that he had signed contracts to do that. Once again, to put that in perspective, there are 171,300 metric tons. That's the reported supply of gold in the world. And just this one transaction, Marcos is almost half that, almost half the supply of the world, the supply of the gold in the world. Now, this also suggests that maybe that reported supply of gold in the world is really underreported because it doesn't include Yamashita's treasure. And so the amount of gold in the world could be significantly larger. Another witness who testified in the Roxas versus Marcos trial, Robert Curtis, he went on to say that Marcos contacted him to build a vault to store between 300,000 and 500,000 metric tons. Robert Curtis is an American metallurgist. He owns some mining refineries. He said Marcos hired him to build this enormous vault for 300,000, 500,000 metric tons. That he also consulted Marcos on how to sell gold without disturbing the gold market, without sending the price crashing. So if that's the case, then we're dealing with Yamashita's treasure is multiple times the size of the world's reported amount of gold in the world. Okay, so now implications for this. One, maybe the most obvious implication is maybe gold is not as rare as we've been told, as has been reported. And if the supply is considerably greater, if, like Robert Curtis says, it's several times the size of the supply that we've been told in the world, what does that mean about the price of gold? Does that mean that because we have greater supply, that price appreciation potential is limited, or that it could crash any moment? That's something to consider. Another thing to consider, another point, is that if this hidden financial system is out there, or if there's basically a huge amount of money that we don't know about, whether there's all this gold, and on top of this gold they're issuing debt certificates that people can redeem, and it's being accepted somewhere. Does that mean this system can that gold and can those debt certificates ultimately find its way, or ultimately be converted back into conventional U.S. dollars, British pounds, yen, etc., and can that bid up financial prices, or can that just own up everything? And what's that mean for traders and speculators? Is there really just a whole lot more money that's available out there to bid up the price of stuff? That's another viewpoint. So, and I don't claim to know the answers to this. I've just looked at this information. I think it's worth considering, not only for traders and speculators, but just for people who are participating in the economy day to day. But the basic story here, Yamashita's gold, found in World War II, led to the formation of the Black Eagle Trust. And that's sort of where we are. There's this huge hidden financial system, but potentially seems to be this huge hidden financial system based on an incredibly large supply of gold. That's the basic story. There's some evidence, as we've seen in this video, to support that. Again, if you want to check out more evidence, the book Gold Warriors by Sterling and Peggy Seagraves is probably the best place to start. There's other articles, like we've seen that Bloomberg article. There's the book Babylon's Banksters by Dr. Joseph Farrell as well. That's about it. Any questions you have, anything you want to add, join us at informedtrades.com. We also have this video in an infographic format. I think that might be a format that a lot of people use. We have text commentary as well. If you check out the link beneath this video. Like this video, share it on Facebook, Google+. And if you wish to make a contribution, check out informedtrades.com/donate. All of those things help us grow and help us make videos that help traders learn. Best of luck in your trading and investing, and we'll see you next time. Take care.